Birdyon Riders of Calandia, written by Joy McNeill. The forest seemed unusually quiet that late afternoon as Troy got down from his Birdyon, a griffin-like creature with the head of an eagle and the body of a lion, yet double the size of its cousin. The giant beast shook his golden plumage and eyed his master inquiringly while flicking his tail impatiently. "Yes, I know, Linos, you are eager to return home before dusk, but we have been flying solidly for most of the day, and I am thirsty and tired. It will not hurt to stop here a short while and drink." The Birdyon playfully pecked at his master's shoulder before taking a long drink of the crystal-clear water from the nearby stream. "You can stop doing that, my friend," Troy teased, as he ran his fingers through the creature's silky plumage. "One of these days you will bite my shoulder clean off." After taking his own fill of water, the tracker climbed back up into the saddle and made ready to carry on with their journey home. Then, without warning, an arrow shot past Troy's face and hit the tree behind him with a resounding thud. Troy yelled to Linos to take flight. The Birdyon didn't have to be asked twice, and his powerful wings flapped strongly as they lifted up from the ground and flew skyward. Another arrow whizzed past them while they climbed, but thankfully, whomever was aiming at them were not very good marksmen, and the pair were soon high enough not to be a target any longer. "That was close," Troy said, breathing a heavy sigh. Linos let out a loud screech in reply. "Well, the next time you are not happy about our resting spot, I might just listen to you, Linos. Let us not dwell on what could have happened. We are safely airborne and will soon be at the city." The sun was fading on the horizon as the pair made their descent towards the lights of Calandia. The bright colours of red and gold quickly faded into a dull grey when finally the tracker pulled up his mount in front of the palace gates. A stable hand ran forward to take up the Birdyon's reins and led Linos away, while Troy made off in the other direction to take an audience with the Queen. He knew she would be eager to hear what news he had to relay after his long day. The room fell silent when Troy was announced at the door of the audience chamber. All heads turned to face him while he made his way along the green and gold carpet and bowed low before Queen Larbella. The young queen looked at him intently with anticipation upon her face. "Ah, Troy of Westwood, I see you have returned to us safely. I pray you did not find any adversaries during your day's journey?" "Only in the Crystal Valley, your highness, but they remained unseen and seemed to be few, and not worthy to be called accomplished marksmen," Troy replied, with a slight smile upon his face. "Of that we can be grateful, then. I implore you have worthy news for me this day," she added, looking hopefully at him. "No good news, your highness. Your fears were indeed right for the reason behind the isolated attacks we have been experiencing. The Mer people have found a clamshell empty, which houses the Pearl of Peace. They are fearful it has been stolen by an evil identity, but they do not know whom, nor from whence they came. They cannot understand why anyone would want to end 1,000 years of peace." Troy almost whispered the last few words of his sentence. He knew the Queen would now have to create an army to protect Calandia. That would take time, and whoever had stolen the pearl would be well aware of this fact. They may have already established their own formidable army, ready to attack the city at any given time. The Queen looked at Troy with an expression of sorrow upon her face, but there was also a hint of determination. "Well then, we have no choice. The time has come for us to form a worthy army to protect our people and stop this invisible foe. Troy, you are my most valued tracker. I know you have no formal military training, yet you are the best archer I have had the pleasure to compete against, and your skills riding a Birdyon are matched by no other. Therefore, I am making you the squadron leader for an aerial combat force we will create. On this day I proclaim that every young, fit labourer or stockman over the age of 18 is to enlist in Calandia's army. We will not admit defeat before fighting for our small nation first." There was a hushed murmur from the courtiers as they realized the severity of the matter at hand. It was almost too shocking to comprehend. Yet as Troy bowed before his queen in acknowledgement of her request, everyone clapped and cheered with approval of the tracker's newly appointed position. The following morning at daybreak, Troy, along with 50-odd new recruits, gathered outside the palace gates. There, stretched out across a large field, were enough Birdyon for every one of the new recruits. The riders looked solemnly at Troy as they waited for him to speak. He stood next to Leonos, who seemed to sense something new was afoot, and he kept nudging his beak playfully into the middle of his master's back. However, just as Troy was about to open his mouth to address the group, a shadow came swooping down from out of the clouds, and with the sound of loud flapping wings, a fine-looking Birdyon landed next to them. A figure dressed in sky-blue armour with a full face shield slipped from the saddle and strode towards Troy, seemingly oblivious to the fact that they were late for the meeting. Troy tensed a little and lowered his hand to his sword as the stranger drew close to him. He did not recollect seeing the pair before, because he knew every Birdyon within 100-mile radius of the palace, and he was sure he had never laid eyes on this exquisite creature, nor its mysterious rider. "You are late. What is your name, and from whence did you come? I sense you are a stranger to us," he said in a stern voice. "My name is Adonais. I come from the north and am ready to fight for Calandia. I apologize for my late arrival, sir. I would have been on time if I had not been ambushed on my way here," came forth a softly spoken female voice. Troy was taken aback for a second. He was surprised the stranger was a woman, and he was curious to hear more about her tale. "Ambushed? How so?" "I happened upon a group of insurgents hidden in the Crystal Valley. They thought I would make an interesting target. I escaped with only a scratch, but I needed to remove the arrow from my shoulder before carrying on with my journey," the young woman replied, seemingly brushing off her unfortunate incident as if it was an everyday occurrence. "You are injured?" Troy said in a surprised voice. "Yes, sir, but it is barely a scratch. It was more important for me to be here in time for our training than to trifle with such an annoyance. I did not wish to arrive here with an arrow firmly wedged into my armour." "I say it was good fortune that you were wearing such protection. However, I insist that you have your wounds seen to by a healer after our training," Troy iterated firmly. "Now, remove your helmet and go stand with the rest of the riders." "I will indeed see a healer as you wish, sir, although, as to your other request, I shan't remove my helmet. I like my privacy, which means I prefer to keep my identity hidden. I do, however, pledge my allegiance to the people of Calandia, and I am willing to fight," she replied in a determined voice. There was a quiet murmur from the rest of the group. They were shocked that this young woman seemed defiant towards their newly appointed squadron leader. Yet Troy seemed more amused than angry at this intriguing young woman's statement. She seemed to possess the qualities of a warrior, even though he had yet to learn whether she showed strengths other than flying and the ability to stand her ground. However, he knew if he let her do as she pleased, it would look as though he had the inability to lead his troops. "Adonais, as much as you like your privacy, as the leader of this squadron, I have given you a direct order which I expect you to obey." "Please, sir, may I have a private word with you upon this matter?" the young woman replied determinedly. However, Troy could sense there was a very slight waver in her voice. He beckoned her to follow him as he walked away from the other riders, far enough to be out of earshot. "You had better explain yourself very quickly, young lady. You have wasted more than enough of my time this morning, Adonais," he whispered abruptly. With the new recruit standing so close to him, Troy could see her steely blue eyes from beneath her face shield. The reason I don't remove my helmet in public is because of the painful scars I received as a child. I have always hidden my face from everyone who does not know my history, so I shan't be mocked by them, sir. Troy's expression softened a little upon hearing this. He felt awkward now, because he didn't want to appear weak to the squadron by letting a direct order be broken. Yet he also didn't want Adonais to leave so soon because of her unwillingness to show her scarred face. Very well, the helmet may stay in place. However, this will be the one and only time you disobey an order from me. Is that clear, Adonais? He iterated sternly. She quickly nodded in confirmation. They strolled back to the other riders, who seemed most curious to hear what their leader had to say upon the matter of the unruly new recruit. Troy cleared his throat and surveyed the group intently before speaking. Adonais has given me a valid reason to leave her face shield lowered. However, I will not tolerate insubordination from my riders. Therefore, although I give Adonais permission to leave her helmet in place, she will unsaddle every Birdyon in this field after our morning flight. Now, without further ado, you are all to pick yourselves a mount and wait for further instruction before you take your first flight. Everyone quickly scrambled to find themselves a suitable Birdyon, and Adonais made no attempt to interject at the punishment handed down to her by her leader. Instead, she turned to help the rider next to her mount their beast. Once everyone was seated upon the Birdyon, Troy showed them all how to take off and land safely, how to steer their mounts through the clouds, hills, and the valleys. Although flying was second nature to this seasoned rider, the new recruits found their first lesson most daunting. Yet, one by one, as the morning went on, they started to feel more comfortable and less scared of their mounts. So by the time Troy instructed them all to head back to the field in front of the city gates, they all landed in a flurry of powerful wings, with not one rider losing their seat. The squadron leader was very proud of his troops, and he told them to head to the tavern for lunch, and they'd all meet back in the field at 1 o'clock to commence their combat training. Adonais stood stroking her mount's neck as the other riders left the field. Several stable hands hurried forward to lead the Birdyon back to their stalls, but before they did so, Troy informed them that Adonais was to unsaddle every beast when they were safely tethered, and if she did not, he wanted to be told. Half an hour later, Adonais appeared at the tavern door. She looked to be in pain as she found a spare seat at one of the long wooden tables. The young woman put her hand up to her shoulder and rubbed it slowly as the waitress left to fetch her order. Troy got up from his chair and went over to check on his recruit. I think it would be advisable if you sat out on the combat training this afternoon, Adonais. Once you have taken your fill here, I will escort you to the healer. I very much doubt missing one lesson is going to cause a problem for you. You seem a most capable rider. I am guessing your talents are not limited to flying alone. The young woman's eyes looked up at him gratefully through her face shield, and she nodded in reply. 10 minutes later, the pair left the tavern, and Troy led Adonais down several back alleys and into a narrow single-story building with a dimly lit reception room. It would not have been easy for her to find her own way there, so she was glad Troy had escorted her to the healer. An elderly gentleman came out from a door at the far end of the room and peered at them both over his horn-rimmed glasses. Ah, Troy, it is good to see you again, my friend. Are the rumours true? You are to lead a Birdyon squadron into battle, or have those busybodies from the town square been wagging their tongues freely to no good end? This time the rumours are true, Telesphorus. I bring you one of my riders, who was injured by an arrow this morning. I beg you will find her some relief for the pain. Why, of course. Come through to my surgery, young lady, and I will make you a poultice of herbs. Adonais stood hesitantly for a moment, looking up at Troy and then towards the healer, who had already disappeared out of sight through the surgery door. If you are worried about removing your helmet, Telesphorus will hold any secrets you have, Adonais. I will see you tomorrow morning at the same time for our next flying lesson. Rest well tonight, rider. You have earned it." The following day, all the riders stood ready and waiting for Troy as he strode across the field. There were a great number of bruised limbs and aching muscles after the vigorous workout they had endured during their battle training the previous afternoon, yet not one member of the troop was absent. Even Adonai stood next to her mount, looking fresh and ready for another day's training. Troy instructed the riders what he wished them to achieve that morning. They were all soon swooping through the fresh morning breeze as he showed them how to remain in the saddle in a 360-degree roll and spiraling descent. The squadron leader could not help noticing that Adonai achieved these maneuvers with the greatest of ease, as if she had been riding a Birdyon from childhood. That afternoon, the troops had archery training, and here again Troy watched his newest recruit with interest, as she released the tension of her bow and sent the arrow whizzing through the bullseye of her target. Then, with pinpoint accuracy, Adonai aimed again. This time, the arrow ran straight down the center of the first arrow, splitting it in two. "Who taught you archery?" Troy couldn't help asking, while he stood close behind the young rider. "I taught myself, sir," Adonai replied in a quiet voice. "Well, as it seems there is nothing further I am able to teach you in either archery or flying, I therefore appoint you as my flight lieutenant. You seem more than capable of helping me ready our riders for battle." There was a slight hesitation from Adonai before replying to her squadron leader's request. It seemed she was almost lost for words, yet the newly appointed flight lieutenant soon regained her composure. "Yes, sir, thank you, sir. I will not let you down." "I know you won't, otherwise I would not have offered you the position, Lieutenant," Troy replied, trying to hold back a smile. He then turned his attention to the rest of the squadron. "Right, everyone, training is over for the day. We commence again at 800 hours in the morning. You are dismissed." Over the next month, these routines became the daily schedule for the Birdyon squadron, and as each day passed by, the flyers showed true promise in becoming a formidable army. Yet, strangely enough, no reports of their unseen enemy occurred during this time. Perhaps they had been mistaken in reacting so quickly to a threat which now seemed to have disappeared as fast as it had arrived. Crystal Valley seemed at peace again, and although the Pearl of Peace was still missing, everything seemed to be returning to the way it was before the Mer people had lost their prized possession. When Troy took his place at the royal dinner table one evening, even Queen Larbella told him she may have been too hasty in forming an army. "It saddens me to think we have gone to such lengths and now may have to disband the Birdyon squadron. I should send them back to their families and farms. We have wasted so much time already this summer when there are crops to be sown for winter. I feel most foolish for acting so hastily without first weighing up the loss to our farming community," the Queen told Troy solemnly. "Your Highness, you acted on your best intentions for our people. There is no knowing how this threat could play out, especially as our enemy remains unseen. I think it wise we wait a little longer before disarming our troops, at least until the end of the month." The Queen looked at Troy with a scowl on her face, yet begrudgingly she nodded in confirmation of his suggestion. That evening at the tavern, Troy sat at table enjoying a drink with several of the other riders. He was not sure if he should relay the conversation he had partaken with the Queen, although she had made her comments within clear earshot of the other guests seated at the royal table. However, after several pints of ale and a willing audience, Troy told them that there was a chance they would soon be returning to their families. The response to this news was somewhat mixed. Many of them had enjoyed the change from their farming duties. Learning the skills to fly and riding the clear blue skies on the wonderful and noble Birdyon was a lot more exciting than steering a plough across the stony hard earth or milking a cow. The following morning at training, Adonai was absent. Ever since their very first morning she had arrived, This was the first time Troy's flight lieutenant had not shown up for her training. None of the riders knew where she was, and her Birdyon was still in his stall, so she had not taken an early morning flight. Troy was displeased that his lieutenant had let him down, yet he was not going to cancel the morning's training to go and look for her. After talking with the Queen the day before, Troy decided to lead the squadron into the Crystal Valley once more. If there was still no sign of their foe, he would go ahead with the Queen's order and dismantle the troops at the end of the month. As they flew towards the valley, Troy kept looking behind the group to see if Adonais was flying behind them. He had informed the stable hands where they were heading in the hope that his lieutenant would catch them up sooner or later. Yet as the squadron flew in close formation while swooping low over the valley, there was no sign of her at all. Everything seemed blissful below them. From the rider's vantage point high above the ground, the clear waters of the stream wove its way down the valley like a diamond-backed snake, and the thick canopy of the trees with their different shades of green lay like an emerald carpet upon the landscape. It was indeed a wondrous place. Troy signalled the troop to descend for one final swoop through the valley before returning to the city. He had a heavy heart because he knew that he would need to report his findings to the Queen upon his return. The following month he would return to being just a tracker, and his riders would return to their fields. Then, suddenly out of nowhere, an arrow whizzed through the air and struck Troy in the leg. He looked down and saw a figure dressed all in black and carrying a bow. They quickly darted from a clearing by the stream and headed into the cover of the trees. He yelled to his troops to cover him, and he swung Leonos around so quickly that his Birdyon let out a surprised cry as his master directed him downwards at speed towards the area he had spotted the archer. Troy reached for his bow and drew out an arrow ready to fire at his attacker. Yet, under the thick canopy of trees, it was impossible to see which direction the archer had gone, nor how many more were waiting in ambush. However, with Leonos' sharp eyesight, it didn't take the Birdyon long to spy some movement through the canopy, and with an unexpected swoop to the right, Leonos dropped down through the trees with his large talons outspread beneath his golden body. This action took Troy by surprise, but by the time he realized what had happened, his mount had their prey firmly pinned to the ground. "Cover me, there may be others," Troy yelled up to the riders, as he quickly jumped down from his mount and stood over the hooded person dressed in black. They were trying desperately to free themselves from the Birdyon's grasp, but to no avail. Troy was eager to see who his attacker was. He grappled at their hood and ripped it from their head. As the hood landed on the ground, a shiny, pearly white ball rolled from it and landed next to a mossy rock. The squadron leader let out a surprised gasp as he looked down at the familiar face looking back at him. "Queen Larbella? But how can this be?" "You stupid fool," came her cutting reply. "But now you have seen me, I demand that you get your beast to release me this instant." "Of course, your highness. However, I do not understand why you have stolen the Pearl of Peace, nor why you proceeded to attack your own troops. Perhaps you can enlighten me?" Troy asked in a surprised voice, as he quickly pulled Leonos away from his capture. "Yes, well, I can see why you'd think I am Queen Larbella, but you are sadly mistaken. I assume you are aware of the Calandia law that there is only to be one heir to the throne, hence why only one child is born to the royal couple?" Troy nodded in reply with a very confused look upon his face. "My parents did not want to confuse the people of Calandia when I arrived into the world 15 minutes after my sister. I was sent away from the place on the very day I was born. A courtier took me to live at a small cottage in the far north and cared for me. She raised me as a mere peasant girl, while my sister lived in a grand palace and had everyone at her beck and call. It is Queen Larbella who drove me to steal the Pearl of Peace and create a diversion. As soon as I was old enough to learn of my lineage, my only wish was to return to the city of Calandia. The only way I could do so was to somehow hide my face so that no one could confuse me for my twin sister. I thought, if I could wear a face shield, I would be safe to enter the city where I rightfully belong." "Adonais? Troy questioned, looking intently into the young woman's eyes. But where are your scars? My real name is Adela, but yes, to you I am known as Adonais. The scars I received as a child were not of a physical nature, but scars of the heart. I led you to believe they were scars of the flesh to protect my identity. So now you know my secret. I assume you will have me thrown into the palace dungeon. I am sure once my sister learns of my existence and what I have done, she will have me put to death immediately. Well, I cannot say what the Queen will decide to do with you, Adela. However, there is one thing that must be done first before I take you to the palace. Troy quickly placed the hood back over Adela's head so the other riders could not see her face, and then he tied her hands firmly behind her back. I will instruct the riders to return to Calandia. You and I must visit the Mer people, where we will return the pearl to its rightful place. The troops were surprised when Troy told them to return to the city with neither he nor their prisoner, but they did as he asked without question. Once they had flown out of sight, Troy removed Adela's hood and helped her to climb up onto Leonos' back. The Birdyon turned his head around and eyed the young woman wearily. Troy ran his hand reassuringly down his mount's feathered neck, before turning his attention to the arrow, which was still firmly wedged into his calf muscle. With a slight wince, he quickly pulled the arrow out and applied pressure until the bleeding stopped. He then ripped the sleeve off his shirt and fashioned a bandage around the wound site. Once this was done, they took off into the sky with the flapping of giant wings and headed north. With the extra weight Leonos had to carry, it was some time before the trio reached the ocean. The Mer people were overjoyed to see their pearl safely returned. Troy did not relay the story behind its theft. He was still coming to terms that Adela had stolen the pearl in the first place, and he didn't want the Mer people to judge her for what she had done. The pair remained silent for most of their return trip to Calandia. It was not until Troy asked Adela a question while flying back over the Crystal Valley that they spoke again. Adela, why is it that when you fired an arrow at me the first time in the Crystal Valley, you did not hit me? I know you were an excellent archer and could have easily pierced me through the heart that day, but you didn't. It has never been my intention to hurt anyone. The only reason I aimed for your leg today was because I wanted you to believe that you were truly being threatened. When I heard last night the squadron was to be dismantled, I panicked. I felt most aggrieved at hurting you, she said quietly. And what of your injury the first day you arrived at Calandia? Troy asked. How did you obtain it? I plunged an arrow into my own shoulder. I knew I would be questioned about my face shield when I arrived unannounced at training. I thought if I had sustained an injury, I might not be looked upon with suspicion. You thought of everything, didn't you? Troy exclaimed with a slight smile. Even though Adela had gone about everything in quite the wrong way, he admired her spunk. I thought of everything but my imminent capture, she replied in a whisper. I will speak to the Queen on your behalf, Adela. As much as you think she is a cold and heartless ruler, I have had the pleasure of serving under your sister's rule for a good number of years, and I have yet to disagree with her upon any judgment she has made. You are very kind, Troy, but on this occasion I think you will find it will be in the Queen's better interest to banish me altogether this time. She has no choice. Death awaits this unwanted princess. They fell silent once more, both lost in their own thoughts, as darkness took hold of the night sky, and all that could be seen ahead was the distant twinkling of lights of the city. A number of riders came running forward when Leonos landed in front of the palace gates. They were very concerned that their squadron leader had not returned before nightfall. One of the men took hold of Leonos' reins, while Troy helped Adela from his back. She had the hood back in place, and her hands tied, so that no one could see who the prisoner was. Troy immediately asked for a private audience with the Queen. He didn't want Adela to spend a night in the dungeon, if there was a chance that Queen Labella would pardon her sister. As the pair made their way along the long marble hallway, heading for the Queen's chamber, Troy could feel Adela trembling. This was the first time he had ever seen her act in this manner. Her normal, assertive demeanour had vanished. He couldn't help feeling sorry for the young woman. She had been through so much pain because of the royal rulings of Calandia. Now she was to face another one, and there was nothing he could do to prevent it. Or could he? It only took a second, when no one was around, for Troy to quickly dart down a side passage and make for the door he knew led out to the stables. Once they were outside, he ripped the hood from Adela's head and untied her hands quickly. "What are you doing?" she asked in a confused voice. "Giving you a chance of freedom, but you must promise me you will forget Calandia and find peace in a new country. You are young, talented, and beautiful. I know you are right in what you have said. As much as Queen Larbella would want to pardon you, the laws of our land would not allow it. Otherwise you would never have been sent away in the first place. What parent gives up their child unless they have no other choice? I will not be the one to send you to your death." Adela looked up at Troy with tears in her eyes. She was lost for words. "We must hurry, though," he added hastily. The pair ran to the stables, and Troy went inside to saddle Adela's mount. It didn't take him long to return with the magnificent creature. "I grant you a safe and pleasant journey wherever your Birdyon may take you. Take good care of yourself, Adela. May you find forgiveness for those who have wronged you, and move forward with a clear conscience and peaceful mind." "Thank you for your kindness, Troy. I shall never forget you," she replied as she leapt into the saddle. Then, with a slight nudge of her heel into the Birdyon's side, they rose into the air and made off at speed, heading south. Troy stood there watching on until they disappeared into the darkness. He didn't know what he would say to the Queen about their prisoner's untimely escape, but he knew he would never tell her she had a twin sister. That secret he would keep close to his heart. He did know one thing, though. When the time was right, he would fly south, because a piece of his heart had just flown off in that direction. The end.